See what happens inside an empath when they're hurt repeatedly, not once, not twice, but over and over again by the people they trusted most. Most people think empaths are emotional because they feel deeply. But what they don't realize is this. Feeling deeply also means getting wounded deeply, because empaths don't experience betrayal casually. They absorb it. They replay it, analyze it, carry it, and every painful experience leaves something behind inside them. At first, the empath tries to stay the same. They keep forgiving, keep understanding, keep giving people another chance. But eventually, something inside them begins changing quietly. Not dramatic enough for the outside world to notice immediately, but internally an entire emotional transformation starts happening. Because repeated emotional pain doesn't just hurt an empath, it rewires them. And if you pay close attention, there are specific psychological changes that begin happening inside an empath after they've been hurt too many times. The first thing repeated pain destroys inside an empath is emotional safety. At one point, the empath believed emotional closeness was beautiful. They trusted easily, loved openly, stayed emotionally available. But repeated disappointment slowly changes that because every betrayal teaches the nervous system something. Every manipulation, every abandonment, every moment of emotional invalidation. The empath's body remembers all of it. That's why healed empaths often seem hyper-aware of emotional shifts. They notice small changes in tone, energy, behavior, consistency. Not because they're overthinking, but because repeated pain trained them to watch for danger emotionally. This is how emotional self-protection begins. The empath slowly stops relaxing around people, stops fully opening up, stops trusting words without actions, and eventually their nervous system becomes exhausted from constantly scanning for emotional safety. That's why many empaths begin preferring solitude after repeated hurt, because peace feels safer than unpredictability. One of the saddest things about empaths is this. They usually keep giving long after they're emotionally empty. They continue listening while nobody truly listens to them. Continue understanding while nobody makes an effort to understand them. Continue comforting people while silently falling apart internally. Because empaths not to see, rally, absorb emotional weight, they often become the emotional support system for everyone around them. The person people call during breakdowns. The person who always stays patient. The person expected to carry emotional situations calmly. But after years of this imbalance, something inside the empath begins wearing down. Not dramatically, quietly. The empath becomes emotionally exhausted in a way most people never fully notice. Not physically tired, soul tired. Because emotional burnout is different. It's waking up and no longer wanting to emotionally carry everybody else's pain. It's becoming tired of fixing problems that were never yours to fix. Tired of one-sided relationships where emotional effort only moves in one direction. Tired of constantly being the emotionally mature one, the understanding one, the forgiving one, the patient one. And eventually the empath realizes something deeply painful. Some people only love the comfort the empath provides, not the empath themselves. They love having emotional support, access, attention, healing. But very few people stay when the empath is the one struggling. That realization changes their entire perspective on relationships because once an empath feels emotionally used enough times, they begin protecting their energy differently. They stop over-explaining, stop overgiving, stop emotionally rescuing everyone around them. Not because they became cruel, not because they stopped caring, but because emotional exhaustion eventually teaches them a life-changing truth. You cannot continuously pour from yourself while nobody pours back into you. And after enough emotional burnout, protecting their energy stops feeling selfish. For the empath, it becomes survival. Empaths rarely explode before leaving. They disconnect slowly, silently. That's what makes it difficult for most people to notice. At first, the empath simply becomes quieter. They share less, reply less, explain themselves less. They stop reaching out first as often. Stop forcing conversations that feel emotionally one-sided. Stop trying to fix emotional distance every single time it appears, and eventually they stop emotionally reaching for people altogether. But the strange part is that outwardly they may still seem normal. They still smile, still respond politely, still appear emotionally present while internally they are already detaching little by little. That's the dangerous part, because by the time an empath finally leaves emotionally, they've usually been grieving the relationship alone for a very long time. They've already felt the disappointment, the exhaustion, the emotional loneliness, long before anyone else noticed something was wrong. Repeated emotional pain changes the way empaths attach to people. It teaches them something most people never fully understand. Not everybody deserves emotional access to you. Not everybody deserves unlimited patience, understanding, and emotional energy. And once an empath truly realizes that, their behavior changes completely. Instead of begging people to care, they begin quietly withdrawing their energy. They stop chasing clarity, stop over-explaining their feelings, stop trying to convince emotionally unavailable people to love them correctly, because eventually they understand something painful. If someone repeatedly makes you feel emotionally unseen, forcing the connection harder will not suddenly create emotional safety. That's why many empaths suddenly seem distant after years of overgiving. Not because they stopped loving people, but because they became tired of emotionally bleeding. C for relationships that never truly felt safe. And after enough disappointment, silence begins feeling easier than emotional struggle. So the empath quietly lets go, not dramatically, not loudly, just slowly, until one day their emotional presence is completely gone. People often say things like, "You changed. You used to be softer. You used to care more." But pain changes emotionally sensitive people differently, especially empaths. Because after enough emotional disappointment, the empath slowly realizes something difficult. Being emotionally open without boundaries attracts emotional damage, so they begin changing. Not overnight, not intentionally, but through survival. They become more guarded, more selective, more private about their emotions, energy, and personal life. And from the outside, this can easily look cold. But internally, the empath is usually just protecting wounds nobody ever noticed. Wounds created by years of overgiving, overunderstanding, overforgiving, and constantly tolerating behaviors that quietly destroyed their peace. That's why many healed empaths stop accepting things they once excused. Mixed signals, inconsistency, manipulation disguised as affection, emotional immaturity, lack of accountability. They stop ignoring red flags just because they understand someone's trauma or pain, because repeated hurt eventually teaches the empath something life-changing. Understanding somebody's struggles does not mean sacrificing your own emotional well-being. And once that realization fully sinks in, their entire approach to relationships changes. They stop chasing emotionally unavailable people, stop trying to heal everyone, stop forcing emotional closeness where safety does not exist. They become far more intentional about who they trust and allow into their inner world. Not because they lost the ability to love, but because pain taught them that unlimited empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. That's why healed empaths often appear emotionally distant to people who only benefited from their old softness. The empath is no longer operating from emotional desperation. They're operating from awareness. And sometimes awareness looks cold to people who were used to unlimited access. But in reality, the empath is not becoming heartless. They are finally learning how to protect their peace without apologizing for it. Because after enough, emotional pain, self-P protection stops feeling cruel. It starts feeling necessary. The healing begins the moment the empath stops asking, "How do I make people love me correctly?" and starts asking, "Why do I keep abandoning myself trying to earn love?" That question changes everything, because for the first time, the empath stops making other people the center of their emotional world. Instead of constantly trying to fix relationships, they began looking inward. They began noticing how often they ignored their own needs just to keep connections alive. How often they tolerated emotional inconsistency to avoid losing people. How often did they stay loyal to situations that were slowly destroying their peace. And slowly something powerful begins happening. The empath starts turning all the care they gave others back toward themselves. They begin protecting their energy more seriously, protecting their nervous system, protecting their emotional stability, protecting the peace they spent years sacrificing for everyone else. And little by little, their entire life begins changing. They stop chasing emotionally unavailable people, stop begging for clarity, stop forcing relationships that survive through emotional overgiving. They stop shrinking themselves just to avoid abandonment because eventually they realize this painful truth. Real love should not require self-abandonment. And once the empath fully understands that, their standards change completely. They become more intentional about who they allow close, more aware of emotional red flags, more protective of environments that drain them emotionally, and eventually solitude stops feeling painful. It starts feeling peaceful because for the first time in years, their nervous system is no longer trapped in survival mode. No constant emotional confusion, no emotional chasing, no exhausting cycle of trying to earn love from emotionally unavailable people. Just quiet, just stability, just emotional rest. And for many healed empaths, that peace becomes more valuable than any temporary connection. Because true healing begins the moment the empath realizes they were never asking for too much love. They were simply giving it to the wrong people. What happens inside an empath when they're hurt repeatedly? They become different. Not heartless, not cruel, different. More careful with trust, more protective of their peace. CE more aware of emotional danger and emotional inconsistency because repeated emotional pain changes the way an empath experiences people. At one point, they believed love meant endless patience, endless understanding, endless forgiveness. But eventually, life teaches them something painful. Not everybody deserves unlimited access to your heart. And once an empath fully understands that, their entire perspective begins changing. They stop ignoring red flags just because they care deeply. Stop romanticizing emotionally unavailable people. Stop sacrificing their mental peace trying to save relationships that only survive through suffering. And slowly the empath becomes more intentional, more selective, more emotionally aware. Not because they lost their softness, but because pain taught them the cost of giving that softness to the wrong people. That's the part most people misunderstand. A healed empath is not emotionally cold. They simply stop offering emotional access so freely because repeated emotional pain forces them to recognize something life-changing. Protecting your peace is necessary. Protecting your energy is necessary. Protecting your nervous system is necessary. And eventuality. See, ally the empath stops trying to be emotionally available for everyone. They begin choosing environments, relationships, and people that actually feel emotionally safe. Because mature empaths eventually realize something most